It's a water chemistry and biology. So from the water chemistry, as your pH, ammonia, nitrite, nitrate, everything starts to change, your toxicity levels go up and you kill off your fish. If you create a condition that allows, biologically informed condition that allows for the plants to be introduced, and you pump the water to the plants and you allow for nitrous ammonius, nitrospira, nitrobacter, beneficial bacteria to convert the nitrite to nitrate. It's really not that complicated. It sounds crazy complicated, but it's not. You pump the water, things happen, and it becomes a food, the nitrite becomes a food source for the plants who soak up the extra waste, grow towards the light, filter the water to go back to the fish. It's just a recirculating water ecosystem. That's all it is. So we hacked plastic along the theme of making this thing small and fractal-like, and then introduced an Arduino and Raspberry Pi system to do monitoring to that system to figure out your water temperature, your lighting, so on and so forth, right? What's interesting about that is that now it begins to render data visible so that I can have it here, and we share it with other cities, Milwaukee, Chicago, Miami, but then you can share it in Shanghai, Mumbai, wherever. You can also put it anywhere. So we started working with classrooms and teachers in order to look at how to take these unused spaces, discarded waste of spaces, waste of materials, just use what's in the space or use the people in the space and build it with people. And you start introducing your water and your fish and your vegetables, and now all of a sudden you have a living classroom, pun intended. Living science, whatever, right? Play with it. Eat it. And then those kids then design the art and the aesthetic of the space. So now they have complete ownership of the space, as long as you allow them to sustained ownership of the space. The more you tend to grow it, the more productive it is by them. Usually it sustains the longevity of the system because people are proud, the teachers are real proud, they get, the parents come in. But what's nice is that you can take that home. So this is a 4-foot by 2-foot space with 32 heads of lettuce. And again, you can do it hydroponic or you can do it aquaponic. The reason why you want to try and do it aquaponic with the fish is that your fertilizer is kind of baked into the system. Otherwise, your hydroponic, you have to add chemicals and, for your potassium and magnesium, whatever, iron. So you can aestheticize it for the industrial designers. You always think about how you can make this as the future of the kitchen or the future of the house or the future of the restaurant and the hotels. It becomes a tourist attraction. It becomes this thing of beauty that literally, we stick these things in places and people just are drawn to them. It's bizarre. It's really interesting. Kids go straight to the fish. Adults go straight to the plants. It's like this thing, this healing thing that has to happen. And then there's people who sit and just look and then just listen. So in order to do a wall system, there's a certain kind of design that you have to do for a wall system, especially for maintenance. If you're going to do a hydroponic table, which is pretty awesome, you're growing the table so that you can sit there and eat from it. The vertical system, you have to start thinking about head height of a pump and then energy. Like if a pump is only 100 gallons per hour, it only has a head height of maybe 4 feet. So if it gets to 4-foot height, it won't go any higher, right? Little simple things. And you have to think about the draining system. Is it 2 gallons per hour? Is it 200 gallons per hour? What is it in order to sustain the flow rate of the system to keep that? It's biologically informed. So we started looking at spaces, thinking spaces. That's one school in Milwaukee on the top, one school in Chicago on the bottom. Both around the same time, both competing with each other through the internet. Saying who's doing the better system, who's doing the better growth, how many people did you reach, how many people did you feed, and it just kind of becomes its own thing. It's a great reference point for the teachers. Industrial warehouse, industrialization. One of the losses, the things that we didn't think about was like the products. If you extract all of your steel, if you extract all of your stuff from the earth and you don't replenish, what happens? You're left with a hole. There's a way to think about this theoretically through a metabolic rift. Urban metabolism is the way you generally want to talk about waste streams. Input, output. If you eat a lot, You have a lot of certain kind of output. If depending on what you have on the input, your body responds a certain kind of way, your output is a certain kind of way. We started extracting so much in a way that in an economic framework that devalued natural capital and devalued human capital. So if you devalue people and labor, people are framed as dispensable, you can dispose of them at any given time, but you're left with these holes, physical holes in the earth or populations or materials. So this thing was left as an example of a metabolic rift. This is a 60,000 square foot shoe warehouse that became obsolete from globalization, global capital. What we did is we took the existing metal racking systems in it and the display cases in it, and then talked to the carpenters, plumbers, electricians, folks in the neighborhood in the south side of Chicago, and then we created an ecosystem within that space. So now you're going year-round chard, basil, arugula, leafy greens, what have you, tilapia, done catfish, perch, crayfish. And what's great is that it becomes a space, it's a tinkering space, it's a safe space. It's like you got the drains, you got this concrete, you got everything you possibly need. We had to rethink the roof, we had to rethink ventilation. But you have everything you need. We actually put, have you ever seen Big Ass Fans? There's a company called Big Ass Fans, like Big Ass Fans. Right, they're huge, they're awesome. And then if you strategically place them around the place, you don't have to worry about all your HVAC, your heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, which will like run you gazillions of dollars. You start just doing your circulation off of fans. And they're also remote control, and you can do fancy technology side of things. Best part is then you have an interface for people to interact. And it's a common interface, like a website, that everybody can go, traffic goes, people share information, and they share ideas, and share thoughts. Then we took it one step further, open sourced it through through SketchUp. So those are high school models to then think about how to design and how to rethink space. And you can do sketchy physics and all these simulations in them. Then we started thinking about how do you plug that into Rhino or 3D Max and do rotoscope designs of spaces. So that's a firehouse that's been sitting since 1914. What would it take in order to rethink that space? It's a civic space that became obsolete because of our society. As we had new forms of firehouses, that space became new types of fire trucks, that became obsolete. So this is also one of my favorites. That wood, remember that glass we saw at the beginning of the presentation? It's delivered in those crates and pallets. And it tends to get trashed and thrown away and burnt in the landfills. So tempered glass is very heavy, extremely heavy. Once you start to, if it's cut wrong, it's thrown away. If it's shattered or cracked, it's thrown away. If anything happens to it, it's thrown away. The crates are always thrown away because no one's thinking about them. They're just like designing these things to just, so what we did is we said, cool, we'll teach the youth that we work with how to deconstruct, how to think about the knots, the grains, the stains, the finish, the processes, what is cupping, what are the tools, how does this relate to math, how does it relate to science, how does it relate to urban ecology, and we got the rogue Arduino hacker that's trying to think of other technology systems. But they get ownership, and we started thinking of different creative ways to use the wood. So then we started doing shipping container that we see everywhere. We created Think Do Pods. So made that's a graffiti piece by Max Sansing, but then we created as a cutout. So all of the kids and all the team began to cut it out, and we add a layer of 3 dimension to it, and it becomes a skin for the pod for the shipping container, and that's the inside of the shipping container with a monitoring system. But then we flipped it after we were done with that experiment, and we did it into an art. We took that skin and put it into an art gallery, and then used the art gallery space as a classroom. Just remixing of space, remixing materials, maximization of the life cycle of materials. And then the other stuff, we made furniture. So it's not that difficult to make a pallet chair. But the thought process in it, and the preservation and the solution-oriented design around taking this waste material into a furniture, we started doing tables and chairs. Why? Because we grow food. The more you get people to sit at the table, to get all these different people to sit at the table, and you're like, holy shit, I just made all this. Like, this is awesome, but we appreciate the food that much more, and now I can have a conversation about our work. So it values labor, values human interaction, values the food, values the materials, values everything. Everything goes up. So we did that as an art installation. We called it the ecology of absence, ? And the thing that's nice about art is that you can really begin to interrogate and question and make statements in a way that you can't in other ways. The wine racks, most of this stuff all sold, but what's nice is it became a collector's item that the people were starting to value, and then we started, it's interesting. So our ecosystem became community users, community partners, educators, employers, hobbyists. That's the individual level. When you scale out, we had to think about, we have community institutions, educational institutions, business institutions that don't typically interface with each other. So it reconstituted the network, and it started rethinking issues of power control and equity and all types of stuff. From a policy perspective, the city of Chicago has faced so much foreclosure and loss of housing and jobs that the typical approach is just erase the house. Because you do have like drugs and crime and prostitution and everything that's supposed to go. But when you erase it, I don't know if you can see all those green dots. That's the one area by us. There's several thousand empty lots. So there's a lot of talk around green, healthy neighborhoods and equity, and there's a lot of rhetoric around it. So we started saying, okay, let's rethink. If you're doing outreach and neighborhood stabilization, if you're doing apprenticeship models, if you're doing a pilot project, and we actually have a product that you can sell. When you start thinking about zoning, that zoning for manufacturing was from 1970s, and there's been nothing there since 1970s. It's not manufacturing. So questions that. Commercial, there's nothing there. That was a school that used to be there. It was a pipeline to prison, literally. It was an alternative school that they destroyed, that was torn down. And then the housing is gone. So in our site, we started looking at our neighborhood, rethinking what are the installations we're going to do with the neighborhood. That's the neighborhood. So what's the zoning for? Right. There's a reason for zoning, but in this case, So when you scale out, you can see all of that green space, and it's just starting to get eaten away. We turned it into a farm. So that farm, we had like 200 to 300 people a week that would come by just to meet and talk and harvest. And the more they would harvest, the more replenish, particularly chard and kale. So that's the normal. That's the new normal for the block. And it's reprogrammed the block in 2 years. Now everybody just knows to come to the Perry Ave Community Farm. You offer what you can. The kids leave school. There's a vocational school, a charter school, an alternative school in walking distance, and some like a bike or a couple stops. They leave school to come to us to go to work, to get a stipend, to get an A or a good mark, in order to feed the community, in order to learn a trade, to build something. So it's a simple way to rethink. So the foreclosed house, that was valued at $300-something thousand in 2007, right before the bubble burst. It became foreclosed. We have secured it, and we turned it into a canvas. So we worked with a couple of local artists, Max Sansing in particular, who has made custom spray paint tips from regular spray paint cans, and he does this as a workshop to folks. And then did this symbol of life, man, woman, elder, boy, girl, with the bonsai tree, and it started attracting people. And the more we attracted people, the biodiversity just started to change drastically. All right, intergenerational, interdisciplinary. People just started losing a lot of their stigma. We have literally everybody showing up. And yeah, we grow watermelon, 15-pound crimson watermelon in the south side of Chicago. Yeah. So the Think Do House becomes a lab for think it, do it, share it, remix it, and then so Wi-Fi kind of hotspot to go to the farm, and it gets us to rethink place and space and equity, and we offer cooking classes and workshops and demos, and so if you're that's a local chef in the area that wanted to become, he wanted to showcase health and wellness lifestyle, he would sample from our stuff, he would send the kids out to go outside. So on forth. You know, it just becomes kind of autocatalytic and literally regenerative. It regenerates its energy source from the network. And downstairs in the basement becomes like a classroom or a showcase, a rehearsal space. We had trumpet players, we had folks. So we got more money from other people to offer. Last year we had 107 jobs for kids. Mentorship, training, they built that. So the youth building under supervision with the kids built the garden, built the greenhouses, built the back. And that's also interesting. That's a wasted space from 1868. That's a farmhouse from 1868 that's been sitting. That city's like, well, how do we rethink that space? So we're working on something with that. The bench, we got some access to cedar, and we've made it a multifunctional sculpture that basically functions as a bench, but it has an aesthetic and architectural quality to it, and it's right next to our little pop-up market. So on Fresh Food Fridays, we reprogrammed kind of a market, which is nice because it's an actual market. We can meet people and exchange goods, and people hang out and share. So all this stuff we just started building with the network activates the space. That's a shipping container in the back that we just made a little stage off of it. Stage over here that attracts DJs and people and performances and just hanging out. And yeah, it just continues to grow. That's crazy. So we have this hawk that shows up. And we have like more and more people just finding like monarch butterflies or like, you know, the caterpillars and there's a curiosity that's just starting to reconnect with stuff that people just don't ever think about when they're in the south side of Chicago. So now we're looking at reshaping the aesthetic of oppression, if you will, into an aesthetic of inclusion. So now that we have the trades and we have the materials, we're starting to look at some of these designs, and some of our partners are from Ireland and Netherlands and all over, looking at energy issues. And you know, if you're about to go be foreclosed and you can't pay your heat, that's a problem. So the interiors of the buildings are being reworked by the wood and the wasted wood. So the library then becomes like really cool, and we're attracting more and more artists that do. So you're not just doing like a wall mural anymore. You're just doing it resonates. It echoes within the feedback, right? Within the ecosystem of it. So you see something that looks like a trademark. I mean, like a signature of the artist. It's kind of cool. This is a friend of mine, Lake Japhas, who does like these. Again, looking at like sculptures, but of wasted houses and parks, and he's turning them into sculptures. Like these are prototypes for something that could become like larger and habitable. But yeah, the $1 million block. That site that is our farm is the site of 2.78, almost 79, really, $1 million annually to keep the people that used to live there or be there or go to school there incarcerated. The tax dollars there's that many people that are incarcerated per year. So tax dollars go, because you know, $30,000 to $50,000 per year per incarcerated individual. So you talk about wasted people. That's unfortunately a lot of our population. So we look at remix, remediate, remember, regenerate, playing with the words. And if you look up noosphere, it's a thought place. It's a place of shared thought. And so we're looking at growing the neighborhood. That's the presentation. Any questions? Yes.
So actually this week at DUSP, there's a case study. It's like a week-long case study that we have to sort of imagine the Cabrini Green row houses, like the redevelopment plan for them. So this is all like very well.
The low rises?
The low rises, yeah.
In an area that's completely been gentrified.
Yeah, exactly. Around, and so I'm curious as to how you see this sort of, see your ideas sort of fitting into maybe a reimagining of housing specifically. So like in spaces where you have to turn old housing into new housing, how can you still incorporate these ideas of preserving buildings?
It's a really important question that unfortunately at this phase in time